All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for Peace Through Action USA's event, Navigating Conflict in Relationships You Can't Walk Away From. We'll officially get started in just a minute or two while folks continue to log in. In the meantime, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Share your name, where you're joining from, and if you'd like, your organization or any projects you may lead in your community. We're really eager to hear about other organizations and programs. So we really welcome you to share that with us in the chat. It's always great to see who's in the room. And while we're waiting, just a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Tonight's session is being recorded. If you'd prefer not to have your name or image shown, you're welcome to change your display name, turn off your camera, and stay muted. You're encouraged to use the chat throughout the event to share reflections, reactions, and questions. Speaker or gallery view both work fine, whichever you prefer. And we'll have a few moments tonight for discussion and group reflection, so stay engaged and don't worry, we'll guide you through every step. So thank you for joining us tonight for the event Navigating Conflict in Relationships You Can't Walk Away From. This is a live virtual learning event hosted by Peace Through Action USA. My name is Chris Wolonsky, and I serve as Director of Programs here. I'm honored to facilitate this conversation tonight and deeply grateful that you've chosen to spend this time with us. Tonight, I am joined by Haley Miller, MSW candidate and Peace Through Action USA intern, who will be helping me facilitate the event. All right, I'm going to just make sure everyone can see. Great. All right. So next, as the organizational host this evening, I'd like to introduce Peace Through Action USA's mission. Peace Through Action USA inspires and equips everyday people to increase safety, belonging, and peace in their relationships and communities by cultivating their compassion and increasing their constructive communication and conflict resolution skills. We now would like to thank our strategic partners, Broadview Church, who made this event possible tonight. As supporters in our work, we are profoundly grateful for their vision, dedication, and commitment to the pursuit of peace. Broadview Church's support in our work also includes being our local partner in our Community Peace Project concept in Calvert County, Maryland. For our guests in Calvert County, we look forward to staying connected with you through our newsletters and social media updates. We have exciting things coming with new opportunities to engage, learn, and take action. So stay tuned. All right, so let's look at our session outline tonight. Now that we've covered a little bit about who we are and the work that makes tonight possible, let's take a quick look at our plan for the session. Here's what we'll be exploring together. We'll start with a quick welcome and grounding activity to help us get centered. Then we'll move into a short media reflection to help us think about how conflict shows up in everyday life. After that, we'll walk through 3 core peace skills: regulation, compassionate boundaries, and active listening. And we'll have a chance to practice them together. And then finally, we'll close with a short reflection to help you bring these tools into your own relationships. My hope is that by the end of tonight, you'll leave with at least one skill or idea that feels doable, something small you can start adding to your wheelhouse right away. All right, so before we dive in, let's take a moment to ground ourselves and get a sense of how everyone's arriving tonight. In the chat, share your name if you haven't already, and one word that comes to mind when you hear the word conflict. There's no wrong answer, whatever feels true for you right now. So yeah, please feel free to share that. One word you associate with the word conflict. Yeah, great. Tension, annoying. That's great. Tension, uncomfortable, problem, stress, uncomfortable, disagreement. Yeah. This is kind of an interesting mix of energy. And that's perfect. We'll have some shared commonalities and differences in how we approach this subject. So next, as we jump into the content, I'd like to briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Chris Wolonsky. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships for Peace Through Action USA. I'm a career-long educator and have been involved in nonprofit work and social service both domestically and internationally throughout my adult life. In my personal time, I'm a spoken word poet, National Poetry Slam champion, and hold a master's degree in communication and oral storytelling. I'm also joined by Haley Miller.
Hi, everyone. My name's Haley, and I'm an MSW candidate at Salisbury University's Graduate School of Social Work. So, the process of receiving my master's degree from Salisbury University, I'm interning with Peace Through Action USA. My work centers on community engagement and empathy building, and I am passionate about creating inclusive trauma-informed spaces where compassion leads to meaningful change. Together, we'll be guiding you through tonight's learning experience. We're excited to be here with you and to explore some practical ways we can all navigate conflict with more compassion and sensitivity. Conflict is part of every relationship, personal, professional, and community. Some relationships we can step back from, but others we can't or don't want to because they matter too much.
So let me share a quick example. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine told me about a tense moment during a holiday dinner. Everyone cared deeply about each other, but a misunderstanding escalated into raised voices and hurt feelings. What struck me was that the conflict didn't happen because they didn't care. It happened because they did care. And the peace skills we're talking about tonight are exactly the kinds of tools that could have helped anchor that moment.
When tension shows up in those spaces, peace building involves learning to stay grounded, communicate with care, and approach the situation in ways that protect both the relationship and your own well being. Tonight, we aim to support you in practicing a few tools that make it possible to hold both honesty and connection, even when things get hard. As you think of your own relationships, consider this. Is there a situation that comes to your mind when you think of these kinds of skills, where you think these kinds of skills could be helpful? You don't have to share it yet, just hold it in your mind as we move forward. Let's start with a quick visual exercise. Take a look at this image and type the first thing that you see in the chat. When you're ready, drop in the chat what you see. Yeah. Interesting, right? So we're all looking at the same picture, but we're not necessarily all seeing the same thing.
All right, now take a look at this image. Type the first thing that you see in the chat. This one really got me. When I first saw it, I couldn't unsee the thing that I first saw. So I'm curious if anybody else has a similar experience with that. Okay, yeah, it's about yeah, everyone's okay. It's about neck and neck there between Seal and Ducky.
Next, let's take a look at this image. Same thing, type whatever you see in the chat.
Yeah, I'm on Team Rabbit for this one. So here's our last one in this little series. If you want to just share what you see here, go ahead and type that in the chat. And our intention with this activity was really to emphasize that this is exactly what happens in close relationships. We're often paying attention to different parts of the same picture. Um, if you notice, sometimes you can kind of you have this constellation of things, and then you're focusing really hard on one section. And if you almost like kind of defocus or unfocus your attention and bring it towards something else, the whole picture changes. And conflict often works similarly. So when we slow down enough to understand what someone else is seeing, we get a much clearer view of the whole situation.
Now let's bring this idea and now let's bring this idea of perspective into the real world. Tonight, we're going to be exploring conflicts that arise in our ongoing relationships, which are the people we meet with, support, and share space. It might be tension with family members you care about, a coworker you collaborate with every day, or a neighbor whose choices might affect your space. Sometimes the relationship stays even when the tension does. So the question we want guiding you through our event this evening is how do we make peace with when we can't necessarily walk away? Next, we're going to be watching a few short videos to help better understand how conflict can show up in family, work, and community settings.
Okay, but before we move on, first, let's walk through how to set up your screen so you can watch the video and still stay connected here in the meeting. If you've been with us before, you know all about this digital mise en place. So if you're familiar with cooking, mise en place is basically how you get everything set up in a kitchen so that you can just make the meal. We're going to do that right now with our browsers. So first, make sure you have both Zoom and a web browser open on your computer. So you've already got Zoom open, keep it as is, but now you're going to open a web browser. You'll stay in the Zoom meeting while opening the video link in a separate browser window. Once we enter the links in the chat, be sure to copy the video link from the Zoom chat. You can do that by clicking the chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, highlighting the link, and pressing Control C or Command C on a Mac. So next we ask that when prompted, you please turn off your camera and microphone so your screen doesn't distract others, but don't leave the Zoom meeting. Just minimize it while you watch the video in your browser. So stay with us. Do not exit the meeting. Just turn off your camera and microphone until we come back. Then once you've copied the link, open your browser, click the address bar and paste the link or right-click paste to open the video. Then you're going to watch the video. And as you do, take note of anything that stands out. Your thoughts, feelings, and reflections. There's no need to take detailed notes. Just notice what resonates with you. And when you've finished your video, come back to the Zoom meeting, turn your camera back on, and be ready to share one or two reflections from what you watched. I know that may have seemed like a convoluted way of saying, we're going to give you some videos to watch, go watch them, and come back and but don't leave here.
All right, everyone. So for this next section, we're going to be doing a media reflection. We're using media clips because conflict in real life can be messy, emotional, and relational. These scenes give us a shared starting point to unpack all of that together. So you're going to pick one of these short clips on the side. A family conflict scene is from The Bear. We have a workplace conflict scene from The Office. And then we have a conflict scene among neighbors married with children. Choose a clip that you feel drawn to. This is a choose your own adventure story. We will drop the links in the chat for you to watch the clips.
Yeah, so you're just going to pick one. Not going to watch all three. So pick the one that speaks to you most.
Yes. Yeah. And so then while you're watching that, they're about 5 to 6 minutes long. We want you looking for what's happening beneath the surface of that conflict. What aren't people saying? How are the relationships in that setting bound together, meaning they can't or don't want to walk away from each other? And then what is something that helped the situation or made it worse? So, like I said, take about 5 to 6 minutes to watch these clips and reflect, and then I'll bring this back together. And after, we'll talk about the slide and we'll just briefly discuss.
All right. So, if anyone has any questions, feel free to share that. But unless you're good to go,
Only one
uh,
of them.
only one of them, Sal. So yeah, just one of the videos, please. Um, and then we'll reconvene at 7:22. All right. So choose whichever one speaks to you most if you're in the mood for a family conflict, a workplace conflict, or community conflict. And then don't leave the meeting, just essentially turn off your microphone and video and come back to us when you're ready. So we'll see you all at 7:22. All right. All right. Great. Okay, I see Kelly's question in the chat. What are we supposed to do after watching and taking notes? Basically, just come back and be ready to talk. So we're all going to connect right now to talk about what we saw.
All right. Yeah. So welcome back, everyone. So now we're just gonna have a chance to reflect as a whole group here, and I would just love to hear from a few different perspectives. We kind of grounded with those questions as we went into the clips, but I'm gonna repeat them real quick. So just kind of what did you guys see happening beneath the surface of that conflict? What did you see people weren't necessarily saying? Maybe how are the relationships in that setting bound together? And then what were things that helped or maybe made the situation worse? Does anyone have anything they necessarily?
I am happy to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I'm Kelly. Hey, thank you for coordinating this event tonight. So
Of
I
course,
watched
thank you.
the family video. I thought it was terrifying. Everything about it felt unsafe to me. It was just this terrifying place where anything could happen, and the bullying and the mom drinking the alcohol and how things escalated, and just the judgments and how siblings saw one another not like as adults but as they were when they were kids, and just the viciousness, the controlling, the blame. It all felt just terribly terrifying to me to watch.
Yeah, that clip really kind of hijacked my nervous system when I saw it.
I agree with that. Um, really, they were talking over each other so much that it was hard for me to grasp what the underlying problem was. But I did think, in thinking about the questions you asked, that the situation was made better at the end when the one kid said, "I love you." So,
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting how that's a small turn like that can diffuse this whole process of escalation.
yeah.
I
Did
agree
any?
with everything. I'm sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go for it.
I agree with everything that Kathy Kelly said, and my notes basically said a lot of noise, a lot of power exchange, and a lot of judgment. But interesting, the "I love you" at the end, since Kathleen mentioned that. And thank you for sharing that, Kathleen, because that gave me a different perspective on it. I actually thought he was being facetious. I thought he was, yeah, I thought he was, I didn't think it was sincere. So I thought he was like, I love you, kind of thing. So it's interesting since we just got finished with an activity of watching these pictures and seeing different things. Yeah. Thank you for that, Kathleen. Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, that's a great observation too, how sometimes the things we say can have that double-edged quality about them, you know. That's the thing with dialogue and communication. It's such a quicksilver thing.
Well, here's
Did
the thing.
anyone?
In that family saying, I love you after all that was just exchanged, I could see how they would just completely react negatively. Like, what are you saying? Like, what are you, like there would be another negative reaction to him trying to say something nice. Anyways, thanks so much.
Maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it seems in any conflicting situation, the problem is that people tend not to listen to the other party, and that creates even more problems. And of course, strong egos being thrown out on the table, so it does not help.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting how certain conflicts just have it's I don't know, I've heard this thing about when people are making decisions, often they'll just attribute it to like it was just a vibe. Just, I just got a good vibe about him or something like that, and I feel like that first clip really demonstrates where it's just like it's sometimes the visceral quality of a conflict can be so overwhelming, that it really does just sort of, there's no kind of reasoning. And yeah, to go with what you said, Del, that ego can just totally take over. So that was for our first video. Did anyone watch the second one? Workplace conflict through the office?
No. We're only supposed to watch one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes, you're only
Yeah.
supposed to watch one.
I was gonna add that, yeah, as I've watched all three, and so like it was interesting to see people like in situations that were experiencing conflict that they couldn't necessarily, walk away from. They're in, they're either at a family dinner or the office one, they were, your coworkers, or the married with children one, they were neighbors and they were all sharing a backyard space. And it was interesting because each one kind of had a thing where they were like almost like nitpicking the other people and like doing things to like intentionally get under their skin each time. And so it's interesting whenever, we're in that stuck space, what we maybe tend to do and not even realize, and how each of those shared that.
Yeah, I think what this is a little bit of a departure from what you just said, but the Office, I think, is so genius in a way because it holds that tension between a professional environment and the content of the show is just so outlandishly outrageous, that it doesn't fit. And so that like disharmony creates the comedy. But it also, when watching videos like that, it's so blatantly obvious where it's like, wow, that would be such a disaster if I behaved like that in a professional space. Um, and it really kind of challenges you to be like, okay, how would I go about that in a workplace environment, which can often feel really stressful. That being said, I also kind of wanted to note that a lot of our workplaces are remote, and that can play out. Conflict can play out in a different way there, where communication and texting can, texting is really great at either masking or amplifying sarcasm. So, there's a lot of misunderstandings that can happen there.
Well, talking about conflicts in the workplace, actually, recently I had an instance which was interesting. There was some kind of conflicting discussion, and the other party in front of me really didn't listen. She had her own set of mind already set up. And at one point, I decided just, I mean, to kind of calm down the situation, just to remain silent. And actually, the silence created even more conflict, which is very unusual. I mean, usually
Oh,
when
interesting.
you keep silent, I mean, people tend to reflect or to think about it. But in that case, it did accelerate the conflict. So I don't know, I mean, how you can handle such a situation. It was very interesting.
Hmm. That is a really interesting observation. Has anyone else noted an instance like that where silence in a conflict or argument can actually amplify?
There's no guarantee, in the reaction, no matter what your intention or how you deliver it, because some people, I mean, let's be real. Some people don't like you because you're likable, right? So to Dell's point, you might be introducing silence as a diffuser or a calmer, and the person gets pissed off about that, right? Like, why are you so quiet? Or why don't you say something? Or your silence means you think you're better than me. I mean, so many different interpretations of silence. Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
I think silence can be a passive aggressive
Mm.
sort of technique that people use. So
Yes,
I'm not
yes.
sure that silence is always the best thing, but
Mm. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
great observation.
I would argue probably everybody in this room, to Sandra's point, at one point or another has used silence as a weapon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the silent treatment, that's what we call it, right? So I think it's an
Yeah.
excellent point, Sandra. Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, silence is it's interesting. We'll talk later tonight about some ways that you can um use some listening strategies that demonstrate that you're listening so that someone feels heard. Because I think that can also be a source of conflict when people are like, I just said all this stuff and you've got nothing to say about it.
Mhm.
Were you even listening to me? So that can be a helpful way to reflect certain things back, to be like, heard, just like with a walkie-talkie, Roger that. You don't have to agree with it, but a simple Roger that can go really far. All right. So did anyone watch the video on community conflict? I would like to share. All right. Haley, maybe you can give us a breakdown of that video.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, so for those unfamiliar with Married with Children, it was, Al Bundy and the wife and all the kids, they were all outside doing something on one side, and then the other people had gotten this like big outrageous hot tub in their backyard, and they were splashing around, and it was just basically an argument over shared space, and someone's, I think, a property line or whatever was being crossed. And so it was just kind of, again, a exaggerated example of just a conflict where people were being forced to share space, and they couldn't necessarily avoid it, and they were navigating, or the lack thereof, of that conflict. So
Yeah, so with this, we really wanted to prompt the group to think about the spaces where we engage in conflict and where conflict shows up in our lives. And for each of us, that will look differently. You may have it quite often in your family. You might be in a really crappy work environment, or perhaps you and your neighbors are or your community members are having strife. So just kind of wanted to prompt you to think about there's different domains that and how conflict shows up in each of those. We might respond to those in different ways.
yeah, I think a big thing that was kind of navigating our discussion tonight was just this time of year we tend to be equated with conflict that we may be more avoided, or maybe more avoidable in other times throughout the year. So just kind of those can be sticky whenever, like Chris was just saying, in settings where um workplace and the family, or maybe your community, where there are more opportunity to engage. And while that can be great, there can also then be conflicts that arise. And so just navigating that can be tricky.
Yeah, and that might be with family, coworkers, classmates, friendships, or people in your community, or it might be something else entirely. A lot of times when we take part in community, it can be an out-group, in-group thing. And, just by virtue of it being a group, a clique forms and then someone's outcast. That's a weird thing humans seem to do. So hold this in your mind as we move forward. All right, so now that we've named where conflict tends to show up most for us, let's look at some tools that can help us move through it more intentionally. When navigating conflict, there are three core peace skills that can make a real difference in how we show up. Those skills are regulation, which refers to calming your body and emotions so you can think clearly before reacting. This involves slowing your nervous system so you can exercise choice. Next would be boundaries, which involve communicating your needs while still respecting someone else's humanity. Boundaries use both honesty and kindness simultaneously. And third is listening. And this is something that we'll talk about to more deeply kind of explore what Del brought up about silence. And so with listening, we'll talk about staying curious and open enough to really understand what's being said, even when you disagree. But the key here is not only just to understand the other person's perspective, but to demonstrate to them that you understand that. Through that demonstration, you're kind of broadcasting a spirit of curiosity and openness to that person. So we'll spend a few minutes unpacking each one and exploring how they can show up in our relationships.
Okay, so our first peace skill is regulation, noticing what's happening in your body and emotions before you react. Conflict tends to activate us quickly. Maybe your shoulders tend to tense up, or your thoughts speed up, or your stomach drops. Regulation helps you slow things down enough to choose your response instead of slipping into instinct. An easy rhythm to remember is name, normalize, navigate. Name what's happening, even something as simple as I'm feeling defensive right now. Normalize it. These reactions are human. Everyone's nervous system gets activated in conflict. Navigate. Once you've named and normalized it, and then you're in a much better position to then choose your step more intentionally. For example, I've noticed that when I feel misunderstood, my shoulders get tense and my thoughts speed up. Simply naming that, even silently to myself, can help me get out of autopilot and then back into choice. There are also a few practical tools that support regulation. Things you can use anytime, like journaling and movement, can support emotional and physical regulation. And then you can also use breath work, which is a very powerful tool as well. And one breath work that I find works very well is exploring the 4-7-8 breathing method. So you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 7, and then you exhale throughout your mouth for 8. And then a few rounds of that can kind of calm your fight or flight, and then same thing, get back to a place where you can choose intentionally. And then once we regulate ourselves, we're in a much better place to communicate boundaries that are compassionate instead of reactive, which brings us to our next piece skill.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to add a note about normalizing feelings. I think it's really interesting. I've had an interest in Eastern philosophy, and something they talk about a lot is like universal things that happen in the human mind, and that has actually been so kind of like comforting in a way because it's like just saying this is the operating system. We're human, we get upset about stuff, and like that's sort of how it shows up. And so yeah, I think really kind of like depersonalizing that sometimes can go really far. I also wanted to add this. I started reading a book about the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and the main character is a little girl, and she's told by her um, kind of milk mother that anytime you are unsure about saying something, twist your tongue 7 times in your mouth before you say it. And but by the time you've twisted your tongue 7 times in your mouth, you'll decide whether you want to say it or not. And so that can just be a good way to regulate. Um, so our second P skill is compassionate boundaries, finding ways to express what's okay and what's not, while still showing respect and care for the other person. So when people hear the term boundaries, they often think it means creating distance or shutting someone out. But compassionate boundaries actually support connection. They make it clear what's needed for the relationship to stay healthy. So a compassionate boundary might sound like, I want to keep this conversation going, but I need a few minutes to collect my thoughts. Or I care about you, but this topic is feeling heated for me right now. Can we take a break and come back to it? Um, so, you're providing that opportunity to draw the line, take some space. But I just kind of also want to emphasize that these limits are really most effective when they're time bound. So deciding to stop talking without determining a time to reconvene can make the other person feel ghosted or minimized, or like there's this asymmetry of power in the conversation. So like if Haley and I were having conflict and she was like, you know what? I'm drawing the line. Um, you know, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Okay, well, now there has become this asymmetry of power where whenever we decide to talk about that again is going to be on her terms, and I'm just going to have to stay available until that happens, right? But if we can agree, all right, we're going to take 3 days, talk to you on Friday about this, put some thought to it, then it kind of both creates that almost that safety net for the other person um, to know what to expect. And that can also kind of uh, reduce the sort of jambalaya of anger and stress and all the things that got you into the mess of the moment. Sometimes that can almost just stew and like cook down into this like gelatinous molasses of hatred and spew. So, yeah, mutually stepping away can be the most pro-social strategy. Having a simple structure to guide you often makes all the difference. So, I've included some sentence formulas here that can make boundary setting feel more doable. You know, if you need XYZ, here's what I need so I can support that. If I'm willing to ABC and I need XYZ to make that work. I want to stay in this conversation and I need ABC to keep it productive. So it's sort of a yes and. Yeah, totally. I definitely hear that. Sure thing, boss. I can do the 12-page assignment that you need by tomorrow, but also XYZ are not going to happen, unfortunately, because I'm only working today and we don't have enough time to finish all those things, or something like that. So those kinds of statements can make space for mutual respect and understanding.
All right. And then our third P skill is active listening. So active listening is the goal of understanding, and then active listening is listening with the goal of understanding and then not just preparing with your reply. When tension is high, many of us tend to defend our point and then wait for our turn to talk. Active listening shifts our focus towards staying actually curious and inquisitive in the conversation. There are a few brief practices that make active listening easier in real moments. Reflect what you heard. A quick check-in like, so what I'm hearing is, helps the other person feel understood and gives you both a moment to slow down. Noticing tone and emotion. Sometimes feeling the underneath words tells you more than the words alone. Ask open questions. Questions like, can you tell me more about that? Or what was the part that felt the hardest? Invites clarity without judgment. For example, one time I was in an argument and I said, I don't feel heard. And instead of defending herself, the person I was talking to said, I want to understand what feels unheard. That one question changed the whole tone of the conflict. The goal isn't for everyone to agree, it's for everyone to feel heard. And when everyone feels heard, they're much more willing to work towards a common ground.
So yeah, with active listening, being a mirror is really key. So again, Roger that.
Okay, so now that we've talked about each piece skill, we're going to practice them. On the screen are 3 short scenarios. Each one shows a different type of relationship where conflict can show up. Scenario A is a family setting where, during a family conversation, a sibling strongly disagrees with a decision you made and raises their voice while explaining why. Scenario B is a workplace setting where, in a team meeting, a coworker interrupts you several times and takes over part of your idea during the discussion. Scenario C is a community setting. A neighbor frequently parks in a spot you thought was mutually understood to be yours. They don't see an issue and you're unsure how to approach it without creating distance. And then we're also going to copy and paste these scenarios in the chat. Take a moment to read through them and then choose one that feels most relatable or interesting to you. You will use the scenario to guide you through our next activity. It doesn't have to be something you necessarily have personally experienced, just one that stands out to you. Hold the scenario in your mind for now as we go in. Here's how our next activity will work. We're going to move into breakout groups for about 10 minutes total. In breakout groups, you're going to focus on each different piece skill. First, you're going to discuss how to use regulation, how you stay grounded when things feel tense. Next, you're going to Next, you're going to think about how you would set compassionate boundaries. And then you're going to consider how you would use active listening, how you would stay open and curious enough to really hear the other person. You don't all have to use the same scenario. Each person can share which scenario they picked and then talk about how they'd applied it to that round skill. When the time is up, we'll come back together and reflect on what experience was like. I'm going to go ahead and open up the break groups now.
Okay, so basically how that will look is in the chat, I've just put the three scenarios. You can go loosely with them. You don't have to pick, oh, the family setting is about disagreement with siblings. If you have one that you've encountered in your life that you'd like to explore, that's totally fine. So workplace or family, workplace, and community settings. And then how might you use one of those three peace skills to address that conflict or escalating aggression? So we're going to divide you into groups and then we'll reconvene as a whole group. All right. So I'm going to do that here. All right, everybody. Catch you on the flip side.
So which scenario did we get? Did we get the family?
Each person kind of picks what most resonates with them. So
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of an individual way of going about it.
Well, I chose the family one. Um, I don't see any problem with the kid raising their voice. No, it's okay.
I agree. That one's a little open for, well, I guess they're all open for interpretation, but I wouldn't necessarily take that as antagonizing. Depends. I guess if it was delivered in an overpowering way, then yes, but a lot of people resolve their conflict that way.
What did the family scenario say again?
During a
So
family
during,
conversation, a sibling strongly disagrees with a decision you made and raises their voice while explaining why.
Oh, at least they're explaining why. I think that's a positive. They're talking. They're telling you why. That opens it for more conversation.
for me, it's not that they stated their opinion or raise their voice, but would they allow me to respond to that? That would be my issue. Like, can I talk back to that, right? Like, and if the answer to that is no or skewed in any kind of way, then I would have issue with it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a sibling dealing with a sibling.
Yeah, yeah.
I would feel very threatened if I were in a situation just because our family typically speaks at a normal voice. We all have different opinions, But if it were one of my siblings and they were criticizing me with a voice, with a raised voice, I would feel a little threatened. That's just me. I would feel threatened by that. And I would probably withdraw a little bit.
So you're thinking of adult sibling. Yeah, I had in mind kids. So yeah, adults should learn by then.
Yeah, I would feel really uncomfortable by that.
So it seems like withdrawing might be setting a boundary for you. Maybe that's kind of a way that you might go about doing that, or
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have, just because if it's like adult siblings, I don't know if I would have the capacity to kind of reframe and go, wow, that's really interesting. I'm really curious about why you think that or why you're saying that. It'd be like, just to kind of be more wondering about it and to diffuse the situation. I don't know if I would have that maturity if I'm dealing with a sibling. I'm being
Yeah.
honest.
I mean, I'm so used, that is my family scenario. So I'm so used to that. Like I didn't have a reaction much to it at all. Um, yeah. In fact, my solution to it was choosing my battles. Like, which of these do I feel like reacting to when I know there's going to be more, backlash or crosstalk. So, but yeah.
Yeah, if you're just raising your voice, not putting the other person down or calling them names, I think, raising your voice, we all have emotions. And if we really care about something, I guess it's okay.
And I also just want to say something positive just about like what we're talking about, because I see so many people out in public at restaurants and I see family members and they're all on their phones. I see couples on their phones and it just is deeply saddening to me. And I would rather see like a family in a heated debate, an argument, and at
Right.
least like we have feelings and I'm interested in connecting with you versus just completely isolated and dead emotionally. That's how I see it.
wow.
Too.
Wow, yeah. I'd rather take a messy connection than none at all. Yeah, I really admire that observation. It's really interesting. Yeah, I also come from an Italian family, so escalation is like our love language. So I'm really like familiar with how that goes. And yeah, I've actually I've had to kind of make note of the times where I lean almost a little too heavy on withdrawal. Where I kind of weaponize that. So it can be kind of a tricky thing to find the right balance for me at least. So
I had issue with the workplace setting. That's the one that got me.
yeah.
Because I know this happens a lot.
Mm,
Um, and it's one that I would personally take offensive,
mm.
but not want to rock the boat. So I would have to find a appropriate response for it.
Has there been any strategies that you've employed in a workplace setting when faced with conflict previously?
For me, some of this, well, one, it depends on who's running the meeting, right? Who's facilitating it and what they allow folks to get away with. For me, it's about setting the tone, respecting everybody's space and time to talk. What's for crosstalk and what's not.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But I do know this coworker does it this time. They're likely to do it again, not only with me, but others. So that probably needs to be addressed in some way. I don't know if it needs to be addressed in front of the group,
Mhm.
but a conversation needs to be had with this person. But I would probably set the tone for, we talk one at a time and we accept even if we don't agree,
Mhm.
kind of thing. I think this has to do with who's holding the space for the meeting and how they're facilitating the discussion. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting me.
Yeah, I think the workplace is so challenging because, your survival is at stake. If you get in an argument with your sister and she doesn't talk to you for a year, yeah, that's not great, but you still have food on your plate, whereas workplace, the stakes are high. And there's so many structures of hierarchy and tiers of power and control in that whole situation. So that can be significantly harder to navigate. What about community settings? Does that show up for anybody in this group?
I just wouldn't have any problem going to my neighbor. I would just knock on the door and just politely explain the situation in a kind way, but very matter of fact. So, I mean, two and three weren't as kind of difficult for me just because I would just very directly deal with the matter.
Yeah, and I applaud that, Kelly. But I think like neighbors is where the boundaries are the least defined, right? Like that's where people either feel entitled or don't care, right?
Yeah, right.
And you don't really have really not any power in that exchange, even if you do what you did. Like, I mean, you could knock on my door and say that, and I'd be like, okay, whatever. I can have any reaction to that, right? So, but I applaud you for expressing yourself. That's important, right? Because maybe they don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing is violating your space. Thanks for letting me share.
No, you're absolutely correct. You're right on when you said that. Um, we have a neighbor who has like really, really bright lights that shine into our house. I've written handwritten notes. I've gone over to meet with his wife. I've sent text messages and it doesn't go anywhere. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting with neighbors, like you noted, Sal, is like there aren't brackets around it. There are kind of no guardrails. There's no HR department for your community. So if things go bad, at least in a workplace setting, there's sort of structures in place to navigate and manage that. Um, whereas community settings are much more fluid and kind of treacherous to navigate. I want to say there's a show, I forget what it's called. I think it's like Love Thy Neighbor or something. And it's about these exaggerated,
Yeah.
wild stories of, people kind of escalating to the point where it's just like, there goes the neighborhood.
Yeah,
So,
I got into it with a neighbor of mine down the street only because he came at me with a correction. He said I was driving too fast, and he was right because there was a day I was driving really fast, late for a meeting. But the fact that I didn't know who he was. He wouldn't introduce himself to me. He refused to do that, and I was like, who are you? And like, I'm not your child. You just can't come at me with a correction. So it was a standoff, and I offered my hand. I said, hey, I'm Saul. I live up the hill. Nothing. So. as a result, even though he was right, I refused to listen to him, and he refused to introduce himself. I went back the next day and gave him a nonverbal sign of peace, but only because I don't want to be driving through my neighborhood, snarling at people or people looking at me or how are they going to come back? Yeah, what's their vengeance going to be? I don't. That's not how I want to live with it, folks. So, um, yeah. Anyways, just thought I'd share that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've even noticed that I live in a quadplex, and it's funny how the first 3 weeks of living here set the tone for the rest of the year. It's like, oh, we don't really say hi to each other, so we just never say hi to each other. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Like, had I just gone through and said, hey, I'm Chris, I live downstairs, I'm that guy you see every other week, it totally changes the whole vibe of like the space. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting how we can almost, once the groove is set, it's harder to get off that groove. Um, you know.
Really good point because I live really peacefully with all of my immediate neighbors, pretty much anybody in the community, but I realize I've had to initiate that. Like I've had to create the space for that, like by being nice to them first or introducing myself first, to your point. And had I not done that, I mean, I'm not saying they would have never said anything to me, but I don't think I would have the kind of relationship I have with them now if I hadn't kind of taken initiative. So
Yeah, definitely.
And I've learned some really deep forgiveness through experiences with my neighbors, like where one of our neighbors their dog got into our backyard and almost killed all our chickens.
Wow.
And it wasn't anything on our part. It was their issue. And I had to go, and everything turned out okay. Everything, but I had to go through some really deep forgiveness, and they've become our favorite neighbors. And they're the ones that now they feed our chickens if we're out of town. Um, they take care of things for us. And so, I had to kind of just get over it and go, it could have happened to me a long time ago or something.
but that's the thing, Kelly. Like I'm talking about us collectively, when we resolve conflict like in a healthy way, like it really builds intimacy, right? Like you said, those folks that you had an issue with can end up becoming family, so if it's done the right way. But I think we're so ill-equipped a lot of times, or we're acting in the moment because we're triggered or in our emotions like I did, that it sometimes destroys. And I think you were saying it's like almost all possibility, but yeah, it depends on how it gets handled, I guess. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think that's such a great note to end on. We're going to return back to the main group, but I really appreciate everyone talking through this stuff, and see you back in the big group. Right. It looks like the other group is still making their way back. So, hey there, everybody. Okay. Great to have everyone back with us. All right, so welcome back, everyone. I know that was a lot to move through, and thank you for taking the time to talk through all those scenarios. Let's take a few minutes to debrief together before we shift gears. You can unmute or drop your thoughts in the chat, whatever feels comfortable. But I'd love to hear, did any conflict resolution skills or ideas come up in your group that were new to you or that surprised you? Anything notable in your conversations that you'd like to maybe give some voice to the whole group? Maybe something about your own process surprised you, how you approach the situation, or something you realized about how you handle conflict. We'd love to hear, love to share.
In our group, I appreciated how Kelly's example of sometimes tragedy or conflict can actually create growth and intimacy, move towards people towards each other. And so I was kind of inspired by that, reminded of that too. It's a good thing to keep in mind.
I know one thing in our group that was kind of interesting. Kathleen mentioned with the workplace scenario, just one little small thing. We were talking about perspective taking and assuming someone's intention on things, and she had mentioned she was like, for all we know, that person is just so excited about whatever project we're all working on, and they're just so excited to get this ball rolling. And I was thinking that absolutely that's correct, but I would never probably think that if this was me and my opinion or my idea was being like stolen or whatever. But I was like, that's such a good idea, and exactly what we were saying about just all about perspective taking and assumptions. Yeah.
I think I mean, common basic etiquette is to not speak over other people. And so if someone is encountering that situation, it's just the polite thing to do to say, I really appreciate what you're saying. However, you're continuing to interrupt me. And on top of that, you are blah, blah, blah. But it just seems like speaking over someone is just not a polite thing to do. And we've all done it accidentally. We've all done it, but it just shows a lack of the other person. There's something lacking in the other person who does that.
So, and I agree with that, Kelly. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know, or they don't know that they're like, I didn't really like, I speak with a loud voice, but I think that I'm speaking like this all the time, but I'm really animated and loud. But I had to learn that, like, people had to give me feedback that that's how I was coming across. So sometimes we don't know. So, but I really appreciate, like Kelly saying, like, oh, maybe they were excited, right? But it's just rude when they're interrupting you. But sometimes we don't know where that's coming from, right? Like, that might be who they are, or it might be a power play, or maybe they just don't know that they're doing that. I don't know. It's guess to the point of this workshop, there's different ways of taking it. But I'm like you, Kelly. I want to assume everybody should know that, right? So don't do it. But yeah, thanks for letting me share.
That just kind of cracked me up a little bit because I had a flashback to growing up. Remembered my mom and dad would fight, and my dad, they would kind of reach a point where it was like, you're at like a level 15 right now. And I mean, my dad was a younger man at the time, but he was like, what do you mean this is how I talk? What are you talking about? I talk this way. Do you I talk, this is me normally talking, okay? And it was just such a funny thing as a kid to witness, because again, that vibe thing is just like, you're like, no, you're up there, man. Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of funny. This thing, it can just slip out from under us, and then suddenly you're in this mode. So
I mean,
yeah,
we're not on the receiving end of ourselves, right? No matter how nice we think we are, we don't really know what it sounds like to other people or how it's being received. Which is why a lot of people who might be the biggest jerks think they're wonderful people, that, because that's the way they see it, but they're not receiving themselves, I don't know.
Oh, that's such a great way of saying it.
And then the argument becomes about how you're speaking as
Mhm.
opposed to, the substance. I think that happens a lot in conflict and arguments. You get off on a tangent on some minor thing that so you never get to what's really going on.
That's
It's very
really,
difficult to deal with people who have really strong egos. I mean, even if you go through the techniques that we were talking about, many of those people who have such a strong egos, I mean, it would be very difficult to dilute any arguments or dispute with those people. They will always think that, I mean, they are right and you are wrong, and that's it.
yeah, so true. I can't help but bring up something that was brought forward in one of our previous virtual events with we had a guest who talked about emotional abuse and how a lot of times things can escalate in a certain way, and the person who's actually being abused will reach their boiling point and sort of boil over. And then it kind of becomes the conversation becomes they're the nasty one, they're the one who's overblown, and they just can't regulate themselves, when really it's like they've been repeatedly brought to this level of just breaking. And then the conversation, kind of going to what Kathy mentioned, is like then the conversation becomes about their their manner and how they're holding themselves. When in reality the actual issue is something deeper and more multifaceted. Um, but yeah, this really all connects. I think all of us are showing different facets of the same issue here. All right. So now we're going to take a look at some case studies. And these are just going to show us some examples where people work through conflict in ways that are pro-social.
Yeah,
So,
so the first case study that we're going to look at, we're looking at Braver Angels, which is it's a national organization that brings people that have differing political and social views. They bring them into the same room for real conversation. Braver Angels create space for people to talk openly and understand where each other is coming from. They use structured dialogue to help people stay grounded, curious, and respectful throughout those conversations. For example, in one workshop, participants shared the life experiences that shaped their political identities, which created an unexpected empathy and connection across the line of differences, and kind of just allowed people to see where the other side was coming from, and was an example of just a conversation where differing views came together and had compassion and connection with one another.
it's great. Yeah, so that's a great resource if you find that some of your conflicts, whether that be in work or at home or in community, if you encounter polarization, this can be a great organization for that. They're really focused on that red-blue divide. So yeah, next we're going to talk about work peace. So for our second mini case study, we're going to look at the workplace here with an organization titled Work Peace. They support teams who are navigating conflicts in settings they can't simply step away from. They use conflict coaching, training, and small group dialogue to help coworkers discuss freely, rebuild trust, and move forward together. So, for example, one team used a structured 20-minute process to repair a breakdown between two coworkers who had stopped speaking to each other altogether. Um, this kind of connects directly to the peace skills we've practiced tonight, regulating ourselves, setting clear and compassionate boundaries, and listening with intention. By bringing these skills into everyday professional settings, coworkers can collaborate with more clarity and respect for each other.
Okay, and then as we come to the close of tonight's session, we're going to love to hear from you about just what's sticking with you, one word, to describe what you're taking away with from tonight's event. Go ahead and whenever you're ready, just drop your word in the chat. Just something that resonated with you, could be a technique.
Or maybe it's a concept or, something that spoke to you this evening.
Maybe like a skill you're going to try to regulate something.
Remain curiously open. That's great.
I love that.
Listening, enlightening. Great. Process of regulation, boundaries, and listening is good. Yeah. Listen. Yeah. I'm saying conflict can be a vehicle of connection. That also stuck out to me in our breakout group.
That's great.
Study cases were helpful. Oh, thanks, Dal. All right, great. Well, these are beautiful. I love seeing the mix of words coming through here. It's always amazing how the same conversation can spark so many different reflections from us all. So as we're closing, we would like to ask that you please complete this post-event survey. This helps us gauge our effectiveness and refine and improve our future programs. So I'm going to drop that survey here in the chat for you. And we just ask that you please complete it, share your thoughts on tonight. It helps us kind of know what went well for you, what landed, things that we could improve. And if you have any ideas on ways that we can improve, we're happy to hear it. And so, yeah, please just share your experience. Next, we'll talk about some ways that you can engage with us as an organization. I'm going to include some QR codes and links for you to follow. Currently, our website is under maintenance, so don't follow them right now. We'll follow up with our full set of resources. And just so you know, this will all live on our website. You'll be able to access this recording at any time in the future. We also have some extended resources that you can explore. So please explore those because there's no short supply of future directions to take with this stuff. So the easiest way to stay connected with us is through our email list. We share upcoming trainings, new resources, and opportunities to take action. So if tonight resonated with you, feel free to sign up by going to this link, which we'll send to you in a future email. Next, we'd also love to stay in touch on social media. It's a simple way to hear about new programs, see peace building in action, and share helpful content with your own networks. Another way to stay engaged is by helping spread peace actions in your community, sharing our posts, nominating a local peace builder, or suggesting an activity of your own. We also have a program called Featured Peace Builders, where we highlight people in their communities who are doing things to advance peace. So if that's potentially you or someone you know, please reach out. We'd love to hear that person's story. So if there's someone who you think really deserves a gold star in your community, we're happy to elevate them. Next is uplift. We also know that inner life and community life are connected. So if spiritual or reflective practices are part of your life, you can uplift peace through prayer, meditation, or bringing these skills into your own gatherings. And if you'd like to participate more directly, we have several volunteer roles. Boosting social posts, teaching a peace skill, just as I've and Haley led this event tonight. We're happy to support people who want to do that in their places of work, home, or community environments. Also, hosting a meetup, writing an issue brief, or exploring leadership opportunities are ways that you can engage with us. We'd love to help you find the right fit. And if you feel inspired to take action locally, you can also launch a community peace project, anything from a small gathering to a larger initiative. We provide tools and support to help you get started. And lastly, before we close, we want to note one more way to support this work, which is financial giving. If you value programs like this and have the capacity, your contributions help us keep them going. We also want to thank Broadview Church and the Calvert Peace Project for their partnership and leadership. Their commitment to community peace building makes events like this possible. And here's our contact information. So if you have any questions or want to support putting these skills into practice or exploring new steps, we're here for you. So please reach out. I'm always eager and excited to connect with people who are interested in peace. So does anyone have any questions before we close out tonight? If not, that's great. If you do, feel free to ask them now or send me an email. I'm happy to connect with you in the future. We're really excited and happy to see some new faces tonight, so we welcome you to join us in the future. We loved having you with us tonight, and we're eager and excited to continue sharing space with you here. So thank you for spending your evening with us, everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Sal.
Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Del. Really enjoyed having you with us tonight. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Haley.
Thank you,
you.
Kathy.
Bye. See you next time.
All right. See ya.